So we're just going to start this waterfalls with a quick paint sketch. So we're not that interested in the lower water, although there is some interesting stuff there. So we'll just put a rough line there, and then we'll get, I'd like to have enough of those trees in there, so I'll put that along there. So now we have this rock formation sort of coming down in there. And we have this rock in front that comes quite a ways over. We have the main cascade coming down here. A little bit of a pool, and then the tail end of a cascade and there. Very loose drawing, we'll just I'm just going to expand the black a little bit. This is just going to give us something to paint on top of. That's ultramarine blue and burnt sienna that I've been using for the dark. Got some green on the canvas from a previous painting, so we're just going to roughly mark in the greens. The black is still going to be somewhat wet, but that's fine. Probably going to clean up the palette after blocking in these colors. We're just going to continue blocking in some of the colors here, just mixing a mix of the ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and yellow ochre so far. And we don't want this color too light, and I think we're going to push it a little bit more into the grayer side. So we're just going to quickly define the rocks. Just defining is a bit of a general word there, or really just blocking in the color. We're going to go a little darker on the other side. You can see you can be very free and loose. There's nothing here that we're too worried about losing or keeping. So we're just going to get a little bit darker down the bottom, and we'll use a little bit. Just added a little bit more burnt sienna, and I think we'll just clean that area. That's pretty good. Not too, we just want something fairly dark here. So we're going to start reinforcing some of these dark. That's still a little bit on the orange side or brown side. Too much paint on that brush, and we're going to take some of that. You can do this scumbling effect with the knife. I find that the brush sometimes is a little bit more focused. And don't worry about if you're getting that into your water. All we've done with the water is block it in. as the brush loses the amount of paint, you can come in and do more delicate, more detailed marks, not remarks. And we're going to put a little bit more dark down at the water line there, as the rock often gets dark when it's wet. Coming up on the point there, just giving it a few don't want to get too much into that just yet, but we'll start taking out some of these little bits of white. These are likely what we're covering is going to get covered by the water, but I want to come in and get some our colors are mostly fairly dark at this point, and this is not a sunshine day, but we do want to get a little bit more light than what's appearing on there, and just taking some of that paint off. So we're just going to, and I don't know that this is going to be light enough yet, but so we're just mixing up something a little on the purple side. We've got magenta down there, quinacridone magenta in this case. I'll just take a look at this. Just gonna give the rock a little bit more color. And we're gonna go back and forth until we get a nice random texture. We'll lighten it, darken it again, lighten it, and start to leave areas alone that we're happy with. And as we continue to work, we're going to do less and less. Sort of like that strong. It's a little bit on the unnatural side, but just going to start putting some major cracks in. These may end up getting covered, but it'll be helpful as far as a guide goes as to what's just rolled some of the paint off that brush. When you're painting these cracks on, try to see some pattern of how they were formed rather than just randomly wiggling rocks. There usually is some order to the cracks or some basic forms that were instrumental when the rock was formed. Even if it was basalt that it was originally from, it flowed in a certain pattern. It's a little too wet to be doing that kind of work there, so we'll let that dry up. So we've given that a little bit more time to dry up. Just added some red there to mix in with the yellow ochre. Yeah, that's a little bit of orange that's happening there. We have some, but I'd like it to be just a little bit more than what's there. So we're just glazing a little bit of that orange in places there, just to get a more subtle. We'll cover a lot of that up, but isn't really much on this side, but we're going to put some on that side anyway. Just a hint of it up there. Sort of doing this partly because it looks great, but it helps balance the color a little bit. We're going to just put a little bit of green into that. It's like some moss or something, algae growing on the rocks right by the water. There is some greenery here, but I'm not sure where. We're just going to amp the purple up a little bit on this side. So we're going to mix up a green using phthalo blue and burnt sienna and white. And the more burnt sienna we put in, the more desaturated the green will get. And I think that's probably good to start with. So we're just going to start describing the flow of this water. And this value is almost identical to what that blue that we laid down there. I think we're going to get a little lighter now. The strokes are done always trying to describe the direction that the water is flowing. Not getting too specific with the strokes just yet. We want to get it a little lighter at the top using a very watery paint. This looks very light, but it's still quite bluish in tone. This isn't really flowing water. This is chaos. At this point, we've got flow coming through here, down through here, and it creates quite a jumble. The mistake that most people make when they're doing cascades and waterfalls is getting to the light colors too fast and not having enough color in there. Often your photo is overexposed on the white water, as most cameras take an average exposure, which is then not necessarily ideal for seeing the detail. If you're looking at it right in person, your eye will adjust to get the perfect exposure on the light. When you're doing thin little streams coming through cracks elsewhere that have started flowing from the top somewhere, don't use too light of a color, because when it's a thin stream, it becomes quite transparent. Try to keep it very random. One of the things I never worry about creating a bad mark or less than perfect mark is because you can always do another mark right over top to fix that. So I think that's trying to approach it with very little fear. Start getting a little bit whiter down here. It's a long way from white yet. The rolling action just helps take some of the paint off the brush. You can come to someplace else and take some off as well. Still kind of a lot on there, but let's start describing this multi-directional flow. Going to introduce a different color. We're going to make that quite a bit lighter and a little bit thinner. I'm probably not going to go all the way to white. One of the problems when you're doing something like a waterfalls is it tends to overpower the rest of the painting because it is so much lighter. So we're just going to come in and do the trees here. I'm going to start with the negative darks coming in from behind. That's a phthalo blue and burnt sienna mix. We're not going to get overly specific with these, but we'll try to keep them fairly loose. Getting some color mixing just because we're going in on wet paint. Which is always a nice thing. It's like free mixes. And put some red in there just to desaturate that a bit. The phthalo blue and yellow make a incredibly vibrant green, maybe a little bit too over the top. So burnt sienna red will all desaturate that. So we're just going to start with the darks coming in here. Clean brush. Just going to soften that bottom edge there. And see here how far away I was from white. That's pure white that I just put down there. And that's just so that the water doesn't overpower the whole painting.